All right, so we're diving into some pretty murky waters today. This Hunter Biden situation. You've got these Reddit discussions, folks on Twitter Law really digging into the legal details, and then this news piece from The Hill that lays out the whole political landscape. It's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. It is. So the basic setup: President Biden's out of office, right? Pardoned his son Hunter for anything he might have done between 2014 and 2024.
That's right. A blanket pardon for that 10-year period.
And you'd think that'd be the end of it, right?
I think so.
But the Republicans, they're not letting go. They're still pushing these investigations. It's like, what's the point? Is this just like a political vendetta?
Well, that's certainly a question a lot of people are asking, especially with, Trump back in the White House.
Right. Well, can't forget about that context.
Exactly. And some of the key figures in these investigations, like Congressman Jim Jordan, they're really pushing this. Last year, his committee was investigating Hunter and his uncle, James Biden, for all sorts of shady business dealings.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
They even recommended perjury charges, claimed the Bidens lied under oath.
See, but here's where things get interesting, right? I was reading through these Reddit threads, and a lot of folks are pointing out that one of the GOP's key witnesses in all this, this guy, Alexander Smirnov, he actually admitted to making the whole thing up. The bribery story about the Bidens. Totally fabricated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he even said he was trying to mess with the 2020 election with those claims. It's wild. Doesn't that kind of make the whole foundation of these investigations a little shaky?
It certainly raises questions about the motives behind these investigations, right? Like, are they genuinely trying to uncover wrongdoing, or is this about something else entirely, like discrediting the Biden family and the Democratic Party?
Yeah, and especially with Trump back in power, as you said, it does make you wonder.
It does.
Okay, so let's talk about this pardon for a second. It covers what anything Hunter might have done between 2014 and 2024, right?
Right.
But does that mean he's totally off the hook? Like, even if new stuff comes out?
Well, it's tricky. It protects him from federal prosecution within that time frame. But, it doesn't cover potential state charges.
Oh, right.
Or anything outside of that 10-year window.
Okay, so there's still some loopholes.
Yeah, there are definitely some gray areas.
And get this. The Redditors are bringing up this really interesting legal wrinkle.
What's that?
They're saying the pardon might actually force Hunter to testify. Because if he's pardoned, he doesn't have that Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination anymore.
Oh, that's a fascinating point. So the pardon could actually backfire and become a tool to compel him to testify. That could completely change the game.
Right. It's like, whoa, unintended consequences.
It's definitely unintended consequences.
It seems like there's a lot more to this than meets the eye.
Layers upon layers.
Exactly. But, shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
The Reddit discussions also brought up this pretty stark difference in how Hunter Biden and Donald Trump are treated when it comes to, alleged wrongdoing.
Yeah, that's definitely a point of contention. You've got Hunter Biden, on the one hand, facing this intense scrutiny, even with a pardon and, not a lot of concrete evidence.
Right.
And then you've got Trump, who's consistently managed to avoid being held accountable for, a lot of things, even with plenty of evidence and allegations against him.
It makes you wonder, is there a double standard at play here?
It's a question a lot of people are asking. Like, is justice being applied selectively? And what does that mean for our system?
It's a good question. And, the Reddit discussions were full of comparisons between Hunter and Hillary Clinton, too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. One person pointed out that at least Clinton was in government, so even if the attacks on her were, questionable, they were at least sort of related to her job.
Right. There was a connection to her political career.
But with Hunter, he's a private citizen. Some people are saying he's only being targeted because of who his father is.
That's a disturbing thought, being targeted not for your own actions, but for your family ties.
Exactly. And it raises these ethical questions about, using investigations as political payback.
It's a slippery slope, that's for sure.
And speaking of slippery slopes, the Redditors also pointed out that while the GOP's laser-focused on Hunter, they seem to have forgotten about some things a little closer to home.
You're talking about Trump's own history of pardons.
Bingo. He pardoned people like Joe Arpaio and Dinesh D'Souza, both convicted of pretty serious crimes.
Yeah, and those pardons were quite controversial.
It just makes you wonder, what are the motivations behind these pardons compared to the relentless pursuit of Hunter Biden?
It feeds into that perception of a double standard, right? Like, are the rules different for certain people?
Exactly. And it's not just about the pardons themselves. It's the allegations against Trump, too. I mean, we're talking sexual assault, financial fraud, obstruction of justice, serious stuff.
And yet, he's never been held accountable.
It's like there's a two-tiered system of justice. One for the powerful and connected, and another for everyone else.
That's a pretty disturbing thought.
It is. And it's not just theoretical, you know. The Reddit discussions show that a lot of people are feeling genuinely disillusioned by all this.
Makes sense.
They're tired of the partisan games, the feeling that justice isn't being applied fairly. Like, what's the point?
Yeah, that kind of cynicism can be really damaging to our democracy.
Absolutely. It's like we're living in two different realities, each side with its own set of facts, values, and narratives.
And that makes it incredibly difficult to have any kind of productive dialogue, to find common ground, to work together on the challenges we face as a country.
Yeah, it's like, how do you even begin to bridge that gap?
It's tough, but I think it starts with recognizing that there are real people on all sides of these issues, people with genuine concerns and experiences.
One Redditor even said they've just stopped paying attention to the news altogether. Yeah, this is too exhausting, too demoralizing. It's like they've given up.
That's worrying. When people disengage, it creates a vacuum that can be filled by more extreme voices.
So where does this leave us? I mean, what are the possible outcomes of this whole Hunter Biden situation?
It's hard to say for sure, but it seems like these investigations will probably continue, regardless of the pardon.
But if the pardon shields him from federal charges,
Yeah.
what's the point? What are they really after?
I think their goal is less about achieving some kind of legal victory and more about political maneuvering.
So keeping the Biden family in the spotlight, damaging their reputation.
Right. It's about swaying public opinion, even if the evidence is thin.
It's like a never-ending political soap opera where facts and truth take a backseat to, sensationalism and partisan agendas.
And unfortunately, this soap opera has real-world consequences.
Well, before we wrap up this part, there's one more juicy detail from the Reddit discussions that I just have to share.
Okay, lay it on me.
Remember how we were talking about the pardon potentially forcing Hunter to testify?
Yes, the possibility of it backfiring.
Well, some Redditors are saying that this could actually play right into the Democrats' hands.
How so?
They're saying that if Hunter testifies under oath and nothing incriminating comes out, it would completely blow up the GOP's narrative.
That's true. It certainly raised serious questions about the legitimacy of the investigations.
It's like watching a house of cards collapse.
And that's a possibility we can't ignore. This whole situation is constantly evolving.
So, as we head into part 2,
Right.
we're left with more questions than answers. Will these investigations actually uncover any wrongdoing? Or is this just a political witch hunt?
Big questions.
Big questions. And how will this all play out in the court of public opinion? We'll continue our deep dive soon. Until then, keep thinking about those questions.
And we'll be back to unpack more of this complex situation. One thing that really struck me going through these Reddit threads is how frustrated people are with the GOP's priorities. Like, it seems they're so fixated on Hunter Biden, they're completely ignoring some of the really big problems facing the country.
Yeah, the Redditors were definitely not holding back. They're like, hey, while you're busy investigating Hunter, the cost of living is going through the roof, climate change is getting worse, and our social safety nets are falling apart.
It makes you think, is there a disconnect between what politicians are focusing on and what people are actually worried about?
Yeah, one Redditor even made this joke that if the GOP spent less time on Hunter Biden's laptop, maybe they'd actually have time to address the price of eggs.
It's funny, but it makes a serious point, right? People are struggling with real everyday issues. They want to see their leaders actually doing something about it.
Speaking of priorities, you brought up Trump's pardons earlier. And a lot of Redditors are comparing that to how the GOP is going after Hunter. It's a pretty stark contrast.
It is. While the GOP is obsessed with Hunter Trump-pardoned people like Joe Arpaio, remember him? The sheriff who was convicted of criminal contempt of court?
Yeah, and Dinesh D'Souza, who pled guilty to campaign finance violations.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the pardons related to the Russia investigation. People like Michael Flynn and Roger Stone. It's like a completely different set of rules.
Redditors are calling it out.
Yeah.
They see it as hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Like, is the GOP really interested in justice, or are they just pursuing a political vendetta?
And it's hard to ignore the timing of all this, right? While they're going after Hunter, a mob of Trump supporters stormed the Capitol trying to overturn a Democratic election.
Yeah, the January 6th insurrection, that's a pretty big deal.
It is. It's a chilling reminder of how fragile our democracy really is and how dangerous unchecked power can be. And yet it seems like Hunter Biden's laptop is a bigger priority for the GOP than addressing the root causes of that attack.
It's like a distraction, a way to avoid dealing with the really important issues.
And the Redditors are seeing right through it. They're asking, why are we wasting time on Hunter when there's so many bigger fish to fry? Why aren't we holding those responsible for January 6th accountable?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And it highlights the deep divisions in our society right now. Like we're living in two completely separate realities, each with its own set of facts and values.
It's a sobering thought. How do we bridge that gap? How do we even start talking to each other again?
One Redditor had an interesting suggestion. They said, instead of trying to solve these big ideological differences, maybe we should focus on finding common ground on specific issues.
That's a good idea. Start small, work together on practical solutions to problems we all face. Maybe that can help rebuild some trust.
It's worth a try.
Yeah.
We can't keep yelling at each other forever. We need to find a way to move forward.
Absolutely. And maybe focusing on what unites us instead of what divides us is a good place to start.
We've covered a lot in this part. The GOP's priorities, the contract with Trump's pardons the shadow of January 6th, and the deep divisions in our society. Okay, so we've spent a good amount of time now unpacking this Hunter Biden situation, and it's messy.
It really is.
We've got the political motivations swirling around, the legal stuff with the pardon, and, not a ton of solid evidence. So where do we go from here? What happens next for Hunter Biden, and what about these investigations? Do they just keep going?
Well, it's hard to predict the future, right? But, even with the pardon in place, the House is controlled by the GOP, and they seem pretty set on continuing these investigations.
They do.
They even said that they think this could potentially tarnish President Biden's legacy.
So I'm still a little confused. If the party covers everything Hunter might have done in that 10-year period, what's the point of all this? What are they hoping to find?
It might not be about finding some kind of legal bombshell. It seems like their goal could be more about influencing how the public sees this whole thing, Keep the story in the headlines, paint a negative picture, and just keep the Biden family under scrutiny.
Some of the Redditors were even saying they think the GOP is trying to manufacture a scandal, even if the evidence is weak, just to try and sway voters in future elections.
Yeah, that's a strategy we've seen before hammer away at a narrative, especially using media that's sympathetic to your side. And you might be able to shift public opinion even if the facts are debatable.
So it sounds like, pardon no pardon, these investigations could drag on for a while.
It's definitely possible. They might try to focus on things that happened outside of that 10-year window, or maybe even try to bring charges at the state level. And they could also use these investigations to pressure Hunter, hoping he might spill something that could damage his father.
Man, it sounds like Hunter Biden's going to be dealing with this for a long time.
Yeah.
It's not just the legal battles either, right? His reputation, his personal life, all that's taken a hit too.
Oh, absolutely. It's got to be incredibly stressful to have the media constantly on your back, to be attacked by politicians. It's a lot for anyone to handle.
And, even though it's Hunter who's officially under investigation, this whole thing has got to be rough on President Biden as well.
No doubt about it. It's a reminder that a president's legacy isn't set in stone when they leave office, especially when family is involved.
Okay, so we've talked about what might happen to Hunter Biden and these investigations, but what about us? What can everyday people do in a situation like this? Should we just sit back and watch this political drama unfold?
I don't think being passive is the answer. We need to stay informed, be critical of the information we're getting, and hold our leaders accountable.
It's our responsibility to push for transparency and try to encourage a more productive, less toxic political environment. It's easy to get caught up in all the back and forth, but we can't let these partisan games distract us from the real problems our country's facing.
Exactly. We got to keep our priorities straight, focus on things like the economy, healthcare, climate change, making sure our government actually works for the people.
Something else to remember is that at the heart of all this is a human being. Whatever your opinion of Hunter Biden, he's facing real consequences, and that shouldn't be forgotten.
I agree. We need to approach this with empathy and fairness, even when it's politically tough to do so.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into this Hunter Biden saga. Thank you for joining us, and we hope this conversation has been helpful.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We encourage you to keep thinking critically, stay curious, and as always, keep diving deep into the issues that matter.